In this episode, I'm going to show you how to calculate right thrust and down thrust, and then we're going to mount the motor box and drill the cowling to get it mounted. So let's go ahead, zoom in, and get to work. Alright guys, welcome back to episode 5.1. I'm going to start things off by talking about down thrust and right thrust. This model definitely has it, and I'm going to show you where you can measure to figure out the degrees. So on the side, we're going to take a measurement on the top and bottom. So on the top, that's 30 millimeters, and this is 25 millimeters. So we know the difference is about 5 millimeters. And the height of this is 100 millimeters. So then we can measure the top, and remember this is 30, and then over here is 35 millimeters. So again, another 5 millimeter difference in the triangle, and then we have one last measurement across the top, and that's about 127 millimeters. So why am I measuring this? So a lot of times you wonder, is there down thrust? And some models have it, some models don't. This one definitely does. And in case you wanted to know if it was at 1 degree, 2 degree, I'm going to show you these measurements can help you figure out exactly what it is from the factory. So basically, you take these measurements and you use the Pythagorean theorem to find what the hypotenuse is of these right triangles, and then you use sine, cosine, and tangent to find that one angle. So really what it comes down to, we do a lot of calculations and, go back to your geometry days in middle school, but really this model has built in 2.862 degrees of down thrust and 2.255 degrees of right thrust. So either you can take my word for it, or you can learn how to do it. You can answer that question at the field when it gets inevitably asked. Does this have any down thrust, any right thrust? All right, so moving on, here's the motor box, and I almost really messed up because these holes here are to allow you to get a tool in to tighten these bolts when you're attaching it to the fuselage. However, with those blind nuts, it blocks that one hole there. So for a second, I thought I was kind of screwed, but actually, if your tool can fit through the blind nut itself, you still have a way to go through there. So I have all of the bolts in here, and we're just going to add some blue Loctite, and just like before, put a little bit, not too much, get a portion of the threads coated, but not a lot, not gooped, not overly crazy, just enough to get some into the threads. We'll put this on here, and then we'll bolt this up to the firewall. This could be slightly awkward. Just take your time and hold it with one arm, and don't force anything, and take your time to get these in. And once you get them all seated, then you can crank them down pretty well. The good thing is if you're using a ball driver, you can come at those top bolts from over top of the motor mount like so, and you should be fine. We'll go ahead and speed this up. And cranking down those bolts. They're with Loctite on, so that should be good to go. And here's how the motor is going to fit on there. And I'm going to key you into a little issue. I mounted this the first time with the wires facing down, and I noticed a problem that we'll see here in a minute, but we'll just go ahead and mount the motor like such to that sliding firewall. And this does get inherently a little bit more awkward because we're using a pretty big motor that weighs a significant amount. So just make sure everything's supported. We'll speed this up as we put these bolts in. And it's always a little bit harder too because the motor's obviously magnetic, so your tools always stick to the side and it's hard to get into the corner there. So here we skipped a bunch and we're tightening the last bolt here. Now, if you noticed, I didn't put Loctite in here because I wasn't sure what's going to happen. The next step is going to be mounting the cowl, and we got to get the spacing right. So I'm planning to take the motor off again, whether or not it's to put some spacers behind it, and actually with good reason, because I mentioned I put those wires on the bottom, and right now on camera, I'm like, all right, this should be moving. Why is this getting stuck here? I wanted to show this whole plate moving forward and backwards. And I'm just now realizing that, oh, it's because of the way the wires come out of the bottom of the motor. It's hitting the bottom of that whole sub-assembly. And I'm just realizing it right now. And I'm like, oh, it's these wires here. So let me go ahead and rotate this. And you can see the wires there, and I do not want some. I think some people would just kind of crease those and bend them. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and take it off and put the wires over top, and we'll just have to see where we're going to route the wires for the speed controller. But now we're seeing a little bit other problem here, and you're going to see me fiddle with this. There's the motor's weight is causing that moving plate to not sit straight, and you can see me, I'm kind of fiddling, like, how can I get this to sit straight? This has to be straight for this step because we're about to fit the cowling, and we need to see that the motor is in the center of the cowl, and we'll put the back plate of the spinner on to kind of show that, but that can't have that little 1 or 2 degree kind of sag there. So what I did, I took a piece of the triangle stock and cut it just bigger than that open space back there and kind of wedged it down there to hold it. I wasn't sure, is it going to be all the way forward, or am I going to have to move it back a little bit? This is all before I've put the cowl on. So in order to keep that motor straight, I put that little wedge piece of wood back there, and that actually worked pretty well. So you will have to find a way to take care of that. So now we have the motor, it's on there, it's straight, and the next step, we're going to take the cowl, put it on, and we're going to start test fitting it to see how it goes on. I suggest doing this, putting the wings on, making sure everything fits, taking the battery hatch, what you see in the upper left, making sure that's on or off, and where you place the cowl, make sure it kind of overlaps the front of that battery hatch. It's kind of a weird, it's not weird, but it's normally that wouldn't happen, but you could still get that battery hatch off. But the key here is before you drill anything, do everything you can to make sure it's going to fit. And there is a little bit of mystery, kind of you don't have to worry about, because the cowl is notched to kind of fit over the wing that I'm showing that there on the bottom. So there's not a lot of room for rotation for the cowl, and there is only so far it can go back because it would go over the wing, and then you wouldn't be able to remove the wing very well, or put the wing on if the cowl is on. So we also have to, this is the point where we have to measure the motor. So I wasn't sure if the motor was going to have to move back. It's definitely not going to have to move back now because I can see I have a little space. In fact, I'm going to have to probably maybe put a few washers behind the motor, and we'll see. So now I've moved over to the big Ernst Mega Stand because with the added weight of the motor, I needed a little bit more leverage sitting on the bench. So the next step here, I'm going to coat the sides of the front of the fuselage with blue painter's tape. And I'm going to do this because we're going to be fitting the cowling over this, and this is just going to make it a little bit more tight, so there's less movement when we're doing the fitting. And so what I do is I cut pieces of cardboard for this when we're fitting these holes for the cowl. I like to use the cardboard from like Pop 12 packs or whatnot, and you can see I was using a piece of cardboard from a Coke Zero. But what I do is through that blue tape, I find the holes with the blind nuts that are already in the fuselage, and I just have a drill bit. I'm poking the hole here. I have already poked the same hole in those pieces of cardboard. So I have 4 pieces of those cardboard. And so what I'll do is I'll put, in this case, the drill bit through the piece of cardboard and then into the hole there. And then I will already have some pieces of tape ready to go, so I can just go and grab it and tape that cardboard to the fuselage like so, and make sure that's really nice and sturdy, because that hole is now marking where the hole for the blind nut in the fuselage is. So I'm just going to do this side on camera. I'll do the other side off camera, but we'll show this process again real quick. So we go through the hole on the cardboard and then put the drill bit into the hole and secure the piece of cardboard with blue painter's tape. We'll secure the piece of cardboard with blue painter's tape, and again, that is showing us where that hole is. So when we slide the cowl over it, we will slide the cowl underneath those pieces of cardboard, and the cardboard will tell us exactly where to drill those holes. All right, as I said, I wanted to make sure everything fits. So I went ahead and put the wing on, and you can see we slide the motor, the cowl on up to where it can go, and it can, with the wing on, it can only go so far back. And you see that the cardboard pieces are over top of the cowl, showing us where to drill. So we'll put the back plate of the spinner on because this is going to help us make sure the cowl is centered, because we know we proved that there is down thrust and right thrust. So if sometimes that's not compensated in the spacing of the motor, and so we might have to just play around with the cowl to get it to look straight. So this is where you're kind of using your eyes to move the cowl to center in that spinner back plate. And when you have the spacing, the angle that you like, then you go around and secure the cowl to the wing, to the fuselage, secure it with as much tape as you would feel comfortable with, so it doesn't move while you're drilling the hole. So I'm going to put a bunch of tape on here to keep it right where I want it, and we'll do some more off camera. So now we're ready to drill. So now you can see there's a bunch of more tape on there. I had to move it around, but the cowling is right where I want it. It's secured with tape, and it's blue painter's tape, so we can we'll be able to take that off no problem. And so now we'll go ahead and drill through that hole in the cardboard into the cowl. and you'll see we'll go right through, go right into that hole, and you'll see the drill kind of just go right in, letting us know that we drilled perfectly for this hole. All right, guys, we're getting long. We're going to have one more short video to fill out the cowl and everything up front. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you guys in a few days. Thanks for tuning in.